really nice. I love it today. To get that out of the way before somebody gets in here, sees me looking at it in the mirror, in the phone. I figured out the key is curling it and then brushing the curls out all the way. Oh my goodness, voice. That's what I'm doing to record. I'm recording. Okay, I'm ready. Ready to read. Ready to find out what happens with Anne. Catch up. Show people my flowers that I got yesterday. Aren't they beautiful? Since I'm the only one in here, I'm going to say yes, they are. Having a Anne talking. Good morning, Kimberly. I was going to say I'm like Anne talking to the bookcase girl this morning. How was your weekend? Aren't they beautiful? I just love the snapdragons in there too. Amazing. Thank you for coming in. So I have somebody to talk to. And happy Mother's Day to you. Late. It's funny, I had to go shopping yesterday and to 2 different stores. And the first store I'll be showing this again if somebody else gets in here. I'll be like pulling these flowers out multiple times during this broadcast. The first store, I was trying to be nice and let the lady behind me go in front of me because she only had a couple of things. And I was like, go ahead of me. And she couldn't believe that I, let her go ahead of her in line. And then the very next store I went to, it happened to me. And I was like, I'm trying to be nice. As in someone else was trying to get me to go ahead of them. So, good morning, Andrew. Look, you missed it. You're 3 minutes late. Look at these flowers Elena got me. And the colors are amazing. And I've had to trim the stems twice because they were so tall. And I can't wait for these snapdragons to just open completely, and the roses will be completely open, and I'll just completely revel in it. Also, she gave me these flowers, and she gave me this beautiful pop-up card, which I forgot to get over here to show you. And she set me down, and she was like, we picked a date. So I'm just going to say it's next Earth Day, April 22nd, 2022. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. And she asked me to be part of it, and I was so emotional. Anyway, I need to get reading. I guess we're already 5 minutes into this. What else happened? I just had a really good weekend. Really good. And had the kids all weekend. So that was nice. And got to see my sisters and my nieces. And had a really, really good run on Saturday. Like, I was shocked how lovely and nice it was. Just happy. I'm just happy today. I know it's like I try to be stoic about these things, because when I'm really upset and sad, I try to tell myself, well, this is temporary. This won't last long, so just deal with it or whatever. But then the downside to that is when I'm super happy, I'm always like, this is not temporary either. And then maybe that's a trauma response. I don't know. But I haven't been like giddy happy in a while. In a minute. Okay, we're going to read chapter 12 and maybe 13, depending on how fast I can get through this. Nobody's commenting, so hopefully I'm still here and coming through. Andrew's still here. Okay. A solemn vow and promise. What could that be? It was not until, do we need to recap? Last time, Anne, the last chapter, Marilla sent Anne to church, to Sunday school, and she couldn't go by herself. Excuse me. I think it might be the perfume that I'm thinking it's the perfume, the new perfume that I bought in March. Because normally I don't get allergies and stuff, but I do spritz a little bit before I get on here, and then my nose starts running. I'm thinking it's the new perfume. Just making that connection right now. Anyway, Anne went to Sunday school, and Marilla couldn't go because she had a headache. So Anne went by herself, and Mrs. Rachel Lynde wasn't there either. So it was kind of like Anne Stagg at church for the first time. You can imagine how awkward that might be for somebody. And then if you're already like an awkward person, doubly, triply awkward. I don't know. She had to figure everything out by herself. But she came back and she told Marilla she wasn't terribly fond of the preacher, and Marilla kind of had to agree with her about that. It was not until next Friday that Marilla heard the story of the flower-wreathed hat. Oh yeah, and she put flowers in her hat. She came home from Mrs. Lynde's and called Anne to account. Anne, Mrs. Rachel said you went to church last Sunday with your hat rigged out ridiculous with roses and buttercups. What on earth put you up to such a caper? A pretty-looking object you must have been. Oh, I know pink and yellow aren't becoming to me, began Anne. She's worried about the colors. Becoming fiddlesticks. It was putting flowers on your hat at all, no matter what color they were. That was ridiculous. You were the most aggravating child. I don't see why it's any more ridiculous to wear flowers on your hat than on your dress, protested Anne. Lots of little girls there had bouquets pinned on their dresses. What was the difference? Marilla was not to be drawn from the safe concrete into dubious paths of abstract. Don't answer me back like that, Anne. It was very silly of you to do such a thing. Never let me catch you at such a trick again. Mrs. Rachel says she thought she would sink through the floor when she saw you coming in all rigged out like that. Oh, I guess Mrs. Rachel was there then. She couldn't get near enough to tell you to take them off till it was too late. She says people talked about it something dreadful. Of course they would think I had no better sense than to let you go decked out like that. Oh, I'm so sorry, said Anne, tears welling into her eyes. I never thought you'd mind. The roses and buttercups were so sweet and pretty, I thought they'd look lovely on my hat. Lots of the little girls had artificial flowers on their hats. I'm afraid I'm going to be a dreadful trial to you. Maybe you'd better send me back to the asylum. That would be terrible. I don't think I could endure it. Most likely I would go into consumption. I'm so thin as it is, you see. But that would be better than being a trial to you. Nonsense, said Marilla, vexed at herself for having made the child cry. I don't want to send you back to the asylum, I'm sure. All I want is that you should behave like other little girls and not make yourself ridiculous. Don't cry anymore. I've got some news for you. Diana Barry came home this afternoon. I'm going up to see if I can borrow a skirt pattern from Mrs. Barry, and if you like, you can come with me and get acquainted with Diana. Slippery slope, indeed. Oh, just wait. Anne rose to her feet with clasped hands, the tears still glistening on her cheeks. The dish towel she had been hemming slipped unheeded to the floor. Oh, Marilla, I'm frightened. Now that it has come, I'm actually frightened. What if she shouldn't like me? It would be the most tragical disappointment of my life. Now, don't get into a fluster, and I do wish you wouldn't use such long words. It sounds so funny in a little girl. I guess Diana will like you well enough. It's her mother you've got to reckon with. If she doesn't like you, it won't matter how much Diana does. If she has heard about your outburst to Mrs. Lynde and going to church with buttercups round your hat, I don't know what she'll think of you. You must be polite and well-behaved, and don't make any of your startling speeches, for pity's sake, if the child isn't actually trembling. She said, I'm sorry. For pity's sake, if the child isn't actually trembling. Anne was trembling. Her face was pale and tense. Oh, Marilla, you'd be excited too if you were going to meet a little girl you hoped would be your bosom friend and whose mother mightn't like you. She said as she hastened to get her hat. They went over to Orchard Slope by the shortcut across the brook and up the Furry Hill Grove. Furry Hill. Mrs. Barry came to the kitchen door and answered to Marilla's knock. She was a tall, black-eyed, black-haired woman with a very resolute mouth. She had the reputation of being strict with her children. How do you do, Marilla? She said cordially. Come in. And this is the little girl you have adopted, I suppose? Yes, this is Anne Shirley, said Marilla. Spelled with an E, gasped Anne, who, tremulous and excited as she was determined there should be no misunderstanding on that important point. Can you guys hear my dog and cat, like, running through the house? Running. Why? Mrs. Barry, not hearing or comprehending, merely shook hands and said kindly, How are you? I am well in body, although considerably rumpled up in spirit. Thank you, ma'am, said Anne gravely, then aside to Marilla in an audible whisper. There wasn't anything startling in that, was there, Marilla? Oh, nothing except, like, teaching people how to spell your name when you first encounter them. Hello. Diana was sitting on the sofa reading a book, which she dropped when the callers entered. She was a very pretty little girl with her mother's black eyes and hair and rosy cheeks and the merry expression which was her inheritance from her father. This is my little girl, Diana, said Mrs. Barry. Diana you might take Anne out into the garden and show her your flowers. It will be better for you than straining your eyes over that book. She reads entirely too much. This to Marilla as the girls went out, and I can't prevent her, for her father aids and abets her. She's always poring over a book. I'm glad she has the prospect of a playmate. Perhaps it will make her more out of doors. Have any of you ever been accused of reading too much as a child? Just curious. Outside the garden, which was full of mellow sunset light streaming through the dark old firs to the west of it, stood Anne and Diana, gazing bashfully at one another over a clump of gorgeous tiger lilies. The berry garden was a bowery wilderness of flowers which would have delighted Anne's heart at any time, less fraught with destiny. It was encircled by huge old willows and tall firs, beneath which flourished flowers that loved the shade. Prim, right-angled paths, neatly bordered with clamshells, intersected it like moist red ribbons, and in the beds between old-fashioned flowers ran riot. There were rosy bleeding hearts and great splendid crimson peonies, white fragrant narcissi, and thorny sweet Scotch roses, pink and blue and white columbines, and lilac-tinted bouncing bets, clumps of southernwood and ribbon grass, and mint, purple Adam and Eve, daffodils, and masses of sweet clover white with its delicate, fragrant, feathery sprays, scarlet lighting that shot its fiery lances over prim white musk flowers. A garden, it was where sunshine lingered and bees hummed, and winds beguiled into loitering purred and rustled. Oh, can you imagine? Also, it must be like amazing to be in the north, like in Canada, in like a northern country, in the spring, and you have like literally all of the spring flowers are blooming all at once. You have roses at the same time as daffodils are blooming. What? Amazing. Oh, I'm so like, let's take a moment to imagine ourselves in Mrs. Barry's garden. Diana laughed. Diana always laughed before she spoke. Why, I guess so, she said frankly. I'm awfully glad. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a whole paragraph. Oh, Diana, said Anne at last, clasping her hands and speaking almost in a whisper. Do you think you can like me a little, enough to be my bosom friend? Diana laughed. Diana always laughed before she spoke. Why, I guess so, she said frankly. I'm awfully glad you've come to live at Green Gables. It will be jolly to have somebody to play with. There isn't any other little girl who lives near enough to play with, and I've no sisters big enough. Will you swear to be my friend forever and ever? Demanded Anne eagerly. Diana looked shocked. Why, it's dreadfully wicked to swear, she said rebukingly. Oh, no, not my kind of swearing. There are two kinds, you know. I never heard of but one kind, said Diana doubtfully. There really is another. Oh, it isn't wicked at all. It just means vowing and promising solemnly. Well, I don't mind doing that, agreed Diana, relieved. How do you do it? We must join hands, so, said Anne gravely. It ought to be over running water. We'll just imagine this path is running water. I'll repeat the oath first. I solemnly swear to be faithful to my bosom friend, Diana Barry, as long as the sun and moon shall endure. Now you say it, and put my name in. Diana repeated the oath, the laugh, fore and aft. Then she said, You're a queer girl, Anne. I heard before that you were queer, but I believe I'm going to like you real well. When Marilla and Anne went home, Diana went with them as far as the log bridge. The two little girls walked with their arms around each other. At the brook, they parted with many promises to spend the next afternoon together. Well, did you find Diana a kindred spirit? Asked Marilla. Oh my goodness. Something is in the air today. As they went up through the garden of Green Gables. Oh, yes, sighed Anne blissfully, unconscious of any sarcasm on Marilla's part. Oh, Marilla, I'm the happiest girl on Prince Edward Island this very moment. I assure you, I'll say my prayers with a right good will tonight. Diana and I are going to build a playhouse in Mr. William Bell's birch grove tomorrow. Can I have those broken pieces of china that are out in the woodshed? Diana's birthday is in February and mine is in March. Don't you think that's a very strange coincidence? Diana is going to lend me a book to read. She says it's perfectly splendid and tremendously exciting. She's going to show me a place back in the woods where rice lilies grow. Don't you think Diana's got very soulful eyes? I wish I had soulful eyes. Diana is going to teach me to sing a song called Nellie in the Hazel Dell. She's going to give me a picture to put up in my room. It's a perfectly beautiful picture, she says. A lovely lady in a pale blue silk dress. A sewing machine agent gave it to her. I wish I had something to give Diana. I'm an inch taller than Diana, but she's ever so much fatter. She says she'd like to be thin because it's so much more graceful, but I'm afraid she only said it to soothe my feelings. We're going to the shore some day to gather shells. We have agreed to call the spring down by the log bridge the Dryad's Bubble. Isn't that a perfectly elegant name? I read a story once about a spring called that. A dryad is a sort of grown-up fairy, I think. Well, all I hope is that you won't talk Diana to death, said Marilla. But remember, this is all in your planning, Anne. You're not going to play all the time, nor most of it. You'll have your work to do, and it'll have to be done first. Anne's cup of happiness was full, and Matthew caused it to overflow. He had just got home from a trip to the store at Carmody, and he sheepishly produced a small parcel from his pocket and handed it to Anne with a depreciatory look at Marilla. I heard you say you like chocolate sweeties, so I got you some, he said. Sniffed Marilla. It'll ruin her teeth and stomach. There, child, don't look so dismal. You can eat those since Matthew has gone and got them. He better have brought you peppermints. They're wholesomer. Don't sicken yourself eating them all at once now. Oh, no, indeed I won't, said Anne eagerly. I'll just eat one tonight, Marilla, and I can give Diana half of them, can't I? The other half will taste twice as sweet to me if I give some to her. It's delightful to think I have something to give to her. I will say it for the child, said Marilla when Anne had gone to her gable. She isn't stingy. I'm glad. For all the faults, I detest stinginess in a child. Dear me, it's only 3 weeks since she came, and it seems as if she'd been here always. I can't imagine the place without her. Now don't be looking, I told you so, Matthew. That's bad enough in a woman, but it isn't to be endured in a man. I'm perfectly willing to own up that I'm glad I consented to keep the child, and that I'm getting fond of her. But don't you rub it in, Matthew Cuthbert. Who's still here? Who is still here and we've finished? Oh, good, Kimberly. Finished chapter 12, despite the absolute ruckus that is going on in my house right now. And I think I'll just go ahead and read chapter 13. So it is a long book, and we have to sustain our pace, interest. All right, the delights of anticipation. It's time. Anne was in to do her sewing, said Marilla, glancing at the clock and then out into the yellow August afternoon where everything drowsed in the heat. It's already August. Oh my gosh. I'm sliding off of this seat. You know what that means. If it's August. It's like last chapter, everything was blooming in Mrs. Barry's garden, and now it's August. Time warp. Time machine. She stayed playing with Diana more than half an hour more I gave her leave to, and now she's perched out there on the woodpile talking to Matthew, 19 to dozen, when she knows perfectly well that she ought to be at her work. And of course he's listening to her like a perfect ninny. I never saw such an infatuated man. The more she talks and the odder the things she say, the more he's delighted, evidently. Anne Shirley, you come right in here this minute. Do you hear me? A series of staccato taps on the west window brought Anne flying from the yard, eyes shining, cheeks faintly flushed with pink, unbraided hair streaming behind her in a torrent of brightness. Oh, Marilla, she exclaimed breathlessly, there's going to be a Sunday school picnic next week in Mr. Harmon Andrews' field, right near the Lake of Shining Waters. And Mrs. Superintendent Bell and Mrs. Rachel Lynde are going to make ice cream. Think of it, Marilla, ice cream. And oh, Marilla, can I go to it? Just look at the clock, if you please, Anne. What time did I tell you to come in? 2 o'clock, but isn't it splendid about the picnic, Marilla? Please, can I go? Oh, I've never been to a picnic. I've dreamed of picnics, but I've never... Yes, I told you to come in at 2 o'clock, and it's 2:45. I'd like to know why you didn't obey me, Anne. Why, I meant to, Marilla, as much as could be, but you have no idea how fascinating Idlewild is. And then, of course, I had to tell Matthew about the picnic. Matthew is such a sympathetic listener. Please, can I go? You'll have to learn to resist the fascination of idle, whatever you call it. When I tell you to come in at a certain time, I mean that time and not a half hour later, and you needn't stop to discourse with sympathetic listeners on your way, either. As for the picnic, of course you can go. You're a Sunday school scholar, and it's not likely I'd refuse to let you go when all the other little girls are going. But, faltered Anne, Diana says that everybody must take a basket of things to eat. I can't cook, as you know, Marilla, and I don't mind going to a picnic without puffed sleeves so much, but I'd feel terribly humiliated if I had to go without a basket. It's been preying on my mind ever since Diana told me. Oh my goodness. Well, it needn't pray any longer. I'll bake you a basket. Oh, you dear good Marilla. Oh, you are so kind to me. Oh, I'm so much obliged to you. Getting through this getting through with her O's, Anne cast herself into Marilla's arms and rapturously kissed her sallow cheek. It was the first time in her whole life that childish lips had voluntarily touched Marilla's face. Again, that sudden sensation of startling sweetness thrilled her. She was secretly vastly pleased at Anne's impulsive caress, which was probably the reason why she said brusquely, there, never mind your kissing nonsense. I'd sooner see you doing strictly as you're told. As for cooking, I mean to begin giving you lessons in that some of these days. But you're so feather-brained, Anne. I've been waiting to see you. Oh my gosh. I've been waiting to see if you'd sober down a little and learn to be steady before I begin. You've got to keep your wits about you in cooking, and not to stop in the middle of things, to let your thoughts rove over all creation. Now get out your patchwork and have your square done before tea time. I do not like patchwork, said Anne dolefully, hunting out her basket or her work basket and sitting down before a little heap of red and white diamonds with a sigh. I think some kinds of sewing would be nice, but there's no scope for imagination in patchwork. It's just one little seam after another, and you never seem to be getting anywhere. But of course, I'd rather be Anne of Green Gables sewing patchwork than Anne of any other place with nothing to do but play. I wish time went as quick as sewing patches as it does when I'm playing with Diana, though. Oh, we do have such elegant times, Marilla. I have to furnish most of the imagination, but I'm well able to do that. Diana is simply perfect in every other way. You know that little piece of land across the brook that runs up between our farm and Mr. Barry's? It belongs to Mr. William Bell, and right in the corner there's a little ring of white birches. The most romantic spot, Marilla. Diana and I have our playhouse there. We call it Idlewild. Isn't that a poetical name? I assure you, it took me some time to think it out. I stayed awake nearly a whole night before I invented it. Then, just as I was dropping off to sleep, it came to me like an inspiration. Diana was enraptured when she heard it. We have got our house fixed up elegantly. You must come and see it, Marilla, won't you? We have great big stones all covered with moss for seats and boards from tree to tree for shelves, and we have all our dishes on them. Of course, they're all broken, but it's the easiest thing in the world to imagine that they are whole. There's a piece of a plate with a spray of red and yellow ivy. Oh, I've lost my place now. Hold on. Red and yellow. There's a piece of plate with a spray of red and yellow ivy on it that is especially beautiful. We keep it in the parlor, and we have the fairy glass there too. The fairy glass is as lovely as a dream. Diana found it out in the woods behind their chicken house. It's all full of rainbows, just little young rainbows that haven't grown big yet. Little young rainbows. Oh my gosh, how cute is that? And Diana's mother told her it was broken off a hanging lamp they once had. But it's nicer to imagine the fairies lost it one night when they had a ball, so we call it the fairy glass. Matthew's going to make us a table. Oh, we have named that little round pool over in Mr. Barry's field Willowmere. I got that name out of a book Diana lent me. That was a thrilling book, Marilla. The heroine had 5 lovers. I'd be satisfied with one, wouldn't you? She was very handsome, and when she went through great tribulations, sorry. She could faint as easy as anything. I'd love to be able to faint, wouldn't you, Marilla? It's so romantic, but I'm really very healthy for all I'm so thin. I believe I'm getting fatter, though. Don't you think I am? I look at my elbows every morning when I get up to see if any dimples are coming. Andrew. She looks at her elbows every morning. That's so adorable. Diana's having a new dress made with elbow sleeves. She's going to wear it at the picnic. Oh, I do hope it will be fine next Wednesday. I don't feel I could endure the disappointment if anything happened to prevent me from getting to the picnic. I suppose I'd live through it, but I'm certain it would be a lifelong sorrow. It wouldn't matter if I got to 100 picnics in after years. It wouldn't make up for missing this one. They're going to have boats on the Lake of Shining Waters and ice cream, as I told you. I have never tasted ice cream. Diana tried to explain what it was like, but I guess ice cream is one of those things that are beyond imagination. Anne, you have talked even on for 10 minutes by the clock, said Marilla. Now, just for curiosity's sake, see if you can hold your tongue for the same length of time. Oh my gosh. Anne held her tongue as desired. But the rest of the week she talked picnic and thought picnic and dreamed picnic. On Saturday it rained, and she worked herself up into in such a frantic state lest it should keep on raining until and over Wednesday that Marilla made her sew an extra patchwork square by way of steadying her nerves. On Sunday, Anne confided to Marilla on the way home from church that she grew actually cold all over with excitement when the minister announced the picnic from the pulpit. Such a thrill as went up and down my back, Marilla. I don't think I'd ever really believed until then that there was honestly going to be a picnic. I couldn't help fearing I'd only imagined it. But when a minister says a thing in the pulpit, you just have to believe it. You set your heart too much on things, Anne, said Marilla with a sigh. I'm afraid there'll be a great many disappointments in store for you through life. Oh, Marilla, looking forward to things is half the pleasure of them. That's another really excellent and famous line of this book. Looking forward to things is half the pleasure of them, exclaimed Anne. You mayn't get the things themselves, but nothing can prevent you from having the fun of looking forward to them. Mrs. Lynde says, Blessed are those who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed. But I think it would be worse to expect nothing than to be disappointed. Marilla wore her amethyst brooch to church that day, as usual. Marilla always wore her amethyst brooch to church. She would have thought it rather sacrilegious to leave it off, as bad as forgetting her Bible or her collection dime. The amethyst brooch was Marilla's most treasured possession. A seafaring uncle had given it to her mother, who in turn had bequeathed it to Marilla. It was an old-fashioned oval containing a braid of her mother's hair, surrounded by a border of very fine amethysts. Oh my goodness, how sweet. I didn't remember that it had a lock of Marilla's mother's hair in it. No wonder it's so precious, right? Marilla knew too little about precious stones to realize how fine the amethysts actually were, but she thought them very beautiful and was always pleasantly conscious of their violet shimmer at her throat, above her good brown satin dress, even although she could not see it, and had been smitten with delighted admiration when she first saw the brooch. Oh, Marilla, it's a perfectly elegant brooch. I don't know how you can pay attention to the sermon or think or prayers when you have it on. I couldn't. I know. I think amethysts are just sweet. They are what I used to think diamonds were like, long ago, before I had ever seen a diamond. I read about them and I tried to imagine what they'd be like. I thought they would be lovely, glimmering purple stones. When I saw a real diamond in a lady's ring one day, I was so disappointed I cried. Of course, it was very lovely, but it wasn't my idea of a diamond. Will you let me hold the brooch for 1 minute, Marilla? Do you think amethysts can be the souls of good violets? And that's the end of that chapter. Do you think amethysts can be the souls of good violets? Also, who else is disappointed in diamonds? They are they're just disappointing. Oftentimes. I feel like the whole idea of diamonds is a fiction, like dreamed up. And I mean, they're okay. And then they're okay. They're pretty and they go with everything because they're clear. But then you read about how they're harvested and all the atrocities involved with that. And then the fact that they're not actually all that super rare, but like, was it De Beers or whoever, you know, came up with like grades and like, oh, well, this diamond's better than that diamond because it's clear and there's no. Anyway, it's all this weird fiction that's dreamed up by somebody. I feel like I'm talking to myself. So I'm going to show you these flowers one more time and hide a second and go.